Great. All right, so we'll get this thing kicked off. So I guess myself, Nick, Tony, please, welcome. Yeah, just like that. It's easier if they can see. All right. All right, so first I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This collaborative effort for this public meeting. For those that didn't hear me with the mic off, this meeting is being recorded. We have a slide of that in just a moment. But in the meantime, I want to introduce myself as Dan York. I'm the director of the IT no longer the IT-transparency team. That was so last year. Now with the Open Government Secretariat. Happy to help coordinate this between our partners in civil society and CDO Council. Rock, paper, scissors. Who's next?
Go ahead. Great. My name is Tony Rodriguez. I'm the director here at the Open Gov Hub, a nonprofit co-working event space. We're very excited to welcome you to our space and partner with GSA and Data Foundation.
All right. Hi, everybody. Nick Hart, president of the Data Foundation. And I'll just say thank you actually for inviting us to partner with GSA on this, CDO Council, Open Gov Hub. This is a really important discussion for us, not just because it has data in the title, that's also what we do every day. But we have, for the last 5 years, been implementing a whole new regime and way of thinking about open government data that has been built on a foundation for years. That has been work that's been happening across federal government, state, local governments. I think it's a really exciting time to be having the exact discussion that we're going to have today. We're going to hear from panel in just a moment, and then some speakers in a bit with public comments, and really look forward for civil society playing a greater role in supporting government and its endeavors to make open data useful and actually used in our society. So thanks everybody for contributing today, and look forward to a great discussion.
Great. Let me get to the slide deck and we can get it kicked off. Here's my hit the work button. All right. I think at this point, we've already covered this slide, luckily. So quick notice for everyone in the room and online, this event is being recorded. A copy of who attended the event, both in person and virtually. The agenda, notes taken in the event will be recorded and posted publicly on the open.usa.gov website. Legal disclaimers. Thank you. All right, all our logos. And why we're here. So we're here today to listen, learn, collaborate, and build trust. And with that, we're going to get right into the panel. Mr. Nick.
All right. Well, that was quick. Okay. So are we using the handheld mics or are we just using the Okay. All right. Come on up, everybody. So really quick segue from what I just said. I'm very excited to talk to the panel today because this is an exciting moment to talk about open government data. And there has been a lot going on for years. And so we have 3 experts from across government to begin that discussion before we lead into the public comment section of the day, and to share some insights about things that are happening, but also look a little bit forward to the opportunities that are in the years ahead. So joining us, we have Zach Whitman, who is Chief Data Scientist at GSA, formerly the CDO at the Census Bureau, one of our federal statistical agencies. Does a lot of did a lot of great work at Census, but now moving into the GSA world. We have Chris Alvarez, who's currently the CDO at the Department of Agriculture, just released a new data strategy. We'll talk a bit about some of the work happening in ag. And Hyun Kim, who's the Deputy Program Director for data.gov at USGSA, co-host of today's event. So I guess not an accident maybe that we have 2 GSA people joining us at a GSA co-sponsored event, but thank you all for joining the discussion. And maybe by way of introduction, it would be helpful to give a bit of context for the public and civil society listening in about the work that's happened in the past, but also looking forward a bit. So maybe we'll just kind of go down the line here, see a little bit about what you're working on, but also thinking about what makes effective open data for the work that you're doing. And I want to start with Hyun because the work of data.gov is so fundamental in this discussion for years. What does that mean to you as just a starting point for this discussion?
Well, first, thanks for inviting me, and thanks to my partners and our Office of Government Policy at GSA and Data Foundation. It's really nice to have an event where we're talking about open data. We've had some that are virtual, but we haven't had it in person in a combination online in a while, so it's nice to be in the room with people who are interested in the subject. I think it might help just to give a little bit of history and context we haven't talked about in a while. So I run data.gov, the United States data site that has been around since May of 2009. And it is an outgrowth of the first days of the Obama administration and the memorandum on government transparency. There's a site, on data.gov, there's a timeline that might be useful to you if you're ever looking for the policy underpinnings. We put that together. It's data.gov/timeline. And it's got the links to the original open government memo, the M1313, the Open Data Policy, as well as links to the Open Government Data Act, Title II of the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policy Act. So GSA launched data.gov in May of 2009. It has always been operated by the predecessors to my current organization, which is the Technology Transformation Services under the Federal Acquisition Service at GSA. It started out as very small with a couple dozen data sets. It was a very high priority in all of that open government effort in those years to make data sets part of any sort of open government effort. There was gradual growth in the catalog. And at this point, if you go to data.gov and go to the catalog, you'll see the current number of data sets is about 292,000. It's actually 100,000 more than that because of the way data sets get grouped into collections and count as one in that number. So the big change in how the catalog is operated dates back to 2013 with the open data policy. So this is not a catalog that we edit, that we enter or delete data sets from. It all harvests from agency metadata sources. So, as far back as the 2013 policy, every federal agency has to maintain a very comprehensive inventory of all of their data assets with metadata that can be harvested into the data.gov catalog. So that's what we've been working on ever since. And then with the Open Government Data Act, all of those provisions became a statutory requirement, expanding it out to beyond the Chief Financial Officer Act agencies, so beyond the 24 biggest agencies. And also just putting that requirement in law and saying that the federal data catalog has to be operated by GSA. So currently, I think we're somewhere around 70 federal agencies that, and then if you count, sub-agencies, it's more entities than that. We also have about 50 or so state and local sources, since they also have catalogs with metadata that can be harvested by any site, not just us. So, our core work is working with the points of contact at those agencies to make sure that the harvesting into the catalog happens when things break, that things get fixed, and also to do the outreach for agencies that have not been in data.gov before, to work with them on configuring metadata inventories to be harvested, and some basic tools for agencies that don't have anything to create a metadata inventory. We also provide a non-public site that assists them with that. So that's the core function. The Open Government Data Act also says that GSA, OMB, and the Office of Government Information Services in the National Archives is to collaborate on a repository of tools, guidance, other reference materials that would help agencies implement the Open Government Data Act. So that site is at resources.data.gov. I think we had a 6-month deadline to launch that. We did that. We also did a refresh about a year later. And it's, it hasn't had a ton of work but since then, but it's one of our focus areas to do an update on that, to see what should, what's there, what's missing as far as what can help agencies. So, that's the core of the work, is making sure that this statutorily mandated federal catalog is functioning, that it's regularly updating with the agency metadata. And vast majority of our work goes to that. And then our other responsibilities about providing reference material and also day-to-day interacting with all of the open data leads at the agencies.
So at some point
Mhm.
before we break, I'm gonna ask you a question about comprehensiveness.
Yep.
But I'm not gonna ask you that question
Okay.
right now, because I'm gonna turn to Chris. Okay, Chris, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Alvarez. I'm the Chief Data Officer for USDA. I've been in that role for about 2 years now, but the CDO role at USDA has been sort of in the capacity that it's been for about 6 or more years. It's really been focused on trying to unlock the power of the data that we have, break down some of the silos, meet some of the demand within the USDA in terms of access to data, and also address a lot of the data sharing and open data needs that we have. You know, USDA is a big organization. We've got about 20 agencies, up to 100,000 employees, a lot of different mission areas that we work in, from food safety to agricultural production to forestry to nutrition programs, loan and insurance programs. It's really quite diverse in terms of the types of data we have, the people we serve, the programs we operate. Even with all that diversity, there's a lot of demand across USDA for access to this data across organizational lines. And so being able to pull together data from our Ag Census, one of our statistical agencies, and help our mission areas understand potential customer base, presence of agricultural communities across the United States, helps them understand where their programs are delivering services effectively and where they might want to focus attention and try to improve service delivery. We do a lot of things to try to make that happen. Within my organization, we've been working to build an enterprise platform so we can bring data together, share it really easily, analyze it, and communicate it outwards. It started many years ago with building dashboards. That was really the customer facing thing. And we went around to parts of our organization and just spoke with leadership and asked them, what are the questions that you can't answer today or take a really long time to get answers to? And those were the things we focused on and got things started. It built a lot of support within USDA for developing this enterprise platform. Along with that, we got some progress in terms of our data maturity within USDA. And the natural, I think, next step for that was, okay, we built some of these data products within our organization. I want to share some of these out as well and start to let the public know about some of the things that we're doing. So as part of that enterprise platform, we built what we call an open data platform. It helps our agencies put data products out on our websites. You see this a lot in the form of dashboards. One example I'll highlight is our food and nutrition service has put out a number of data visualization products that sort of run on this open data platform that we have. And allows them to share in very kind of storytelling types of ways. Here's how we're delivering programs. Here's how, for example, maybe COVID impacted school lunches and food programs for children, and how that changed over time and how steps they've taken to recover. And so those are ways that we're making some of the internal insights that we're gathering available to the public as well. We also work a lot on enablement and building up the culture, the workforce within USDA to be focused on data and using it to drive insights and information. So trying to enable analytics across USDA. We have some data science training programs. We're doing a lot of hiring through internships and fellowship programs to bring students in and bring recent graduates in to work on some challenging problems. We did one project just recently, just earlier this month with Colorado State University doing a data hackathon. It was a real world problem statement that USDA had. We were trying to do some image processing and use analytics to predict what was in that image accurately. And in 24 hours, we got some really fantastic work, and we're taking that and using it to build upon our programs. So those are some opportunities that we're actually engaging with the public with data problems, putting some data sets out there, looking to see, being open and receptive to what we get back, and really trying to improve our processes.
This is great. Okay, we're gonna cut you off there. The FNS example, by the way, a very good one. Multi-billion-dollar program, really solid uses of data. Some of it is not all open. Keep in mind, there's a lot of restricted confidential records, but they're using stratified systems to produce a lot of open data. So I love that example. And it's a good segue over to you, Zach. So over to you.
It's not fair going third. I mean, Young and then Chris just kind of summarized exactly what I was gonna say, if not verbatim. GSA, similar to USDA, has this multifaceted, kind of diverse aspect in terms of its business line. We manage buildings, we also manage contracting, we also have a lot of digital infrastructure, and the orthogonal nature of those three concepts can lead to a lot of different practices and behaviors and ultimately data requirements coming in. So similar to you, we have a federated system where we have multiple data strategies existing within those different groups so that they tailor fit their needs for their own specific business lines. At the CDO shop, we try to provide common infrastructure across those lines. And some of the things that we're kicking off, and similar to it, is an enterprise data solution where we're trying to establish common infrastructure where you can maintain data products. You have a common place to do like large scale ETL, maintenance, curation of your data products, and then ultimately host those data products in an accessible and discoverable place for internal consumption. Again, we want to see what we can do to derive more value between the lines of the data. While there is a lot of direct value for producing this kind of infrastructure for your business line, there's also some cross-pollination opportunities that we can see where we start to bring data into one place that might not have been in full view for the entire organization if we didn't have this infrastructure. So we're establishing this general store and discovery layer. And on top of that, we need to make sure that all of our data sharing internally are seamless so that you can easily take the discovered data product that you found and then move it into an analytics layer or some sort of scalable compute infrastructure. The idea here is that if you can bring down the barriers to working with the data, that cuts down on the frustration or the pain points that you see where it's like, well, it's hard to get access to the data. I have to ask 12 different people, 4 of which I don't know. I have to wait 2 weeks for tickets. All of that encumbers on the folks that are trying to work and be creative with the data products. And so our main objective right now is to bring down the friction points between the idea that you have to being able to operationalize it and actually start to work with the data as quickly as possible. And then the last phase of this overall strategy that we're putting forward is the dissemination of that data. It's no good if you have this great analytics layer that you produce this great idea, but it goes nowhere. Some of it is in the form of a dashboarding type experience where you want to convey a story, you want to have some sort of visual storytelling aspect to it. But a bigger part of our focus right now is in terms of live services. How can we bring that intelligence back into production systems and leverage the information products that our data scientists are working on in some way that informs, say, like building managers, hey, it's hotter outside and this building didn't start up at the same time. I want to go check that out. We want that real-time analytics to reach the workforce directly. Now that also translates into public dissemination. We want to make sure that the data products that we are creating, the information products that we are releasing are of highest quality, ones that are fully qualified. I think one of the things that we're focused on is trying to make sure that the data products are as explained as possible, having good metadata around it, having consistent metadata, things that are approachable for someone who might not be in the domain that we're coming from, so they can understand that data. Because we ultimately know that we as the federal complex produce so much good information, but it's hard to interrelate that information. And so our thinking is if we can do what we can to hydrate that metadata with better, more understandable, digestible information, we can help serve that purpose of a general analytics function where we don't know what's going to happen with that data, but we certainly can help make it more understandable. So generally, we're looking at trying to establish more comprehensive and available infrastructure for our data products and solutions. We're also doing HR work. Chris, again, he puts everything out of my way. But the point is, we're trying to make sure that people have trainings available so that they know how to use the tooling that we're producing, that they have access to the latest technology. So that's part of our experimentation with AI and LLMs and how we can support that inside. And then also making sure that we're doing our best to have privacy protecting technologies across for our dissemination process and making sure that recombination attacks are less possible given our controls in place. So we're trying to build a clean pipeline that goes from leveraging our data products as efficiently as possible out the door so that we can deliver as much value for both our services as well as the end user of our data products.
All right, so you all just covered so much ground. I'm not completely sure where to go next. But thanks for bringing AI into this conversation.
Had-
It'd be a really challenge today if we didn't go there. But so my instinct is to ask you all to just really quickly answer the question as simple as this. Why does open data matter for the work that you're doing? In the very simple construct. Yes, it's in law. Yes, you went all the way back to the 2013 memo. Thank you for that. Why does it actually matter? What's your like selling point on this for the value proposition of open data? Do you have any quick responses?
Well, I'll throw one thought out. I think it really matters in terms of understanding what government does and how we operate. I think, USDA is an example where a lot of times the recipients of our benefits don't even know that it's a USDA program that's providing that service and that benefit. I think the more that we talk about that through our data, and not just that we have this program, but how much, I mean, how many meals are being served in a year through some of the food nutrition service programs. It's really significant and it's a major benefit to, it's a major impact to and investment in resources for USDA. So I think that's one way that the data helps communicate who we are, what we do, how we relate to public in general.
I think we offer an unbiased ground truth for the internet. We can serve so much really well thought out and good ideas into a place that is trustworthy. And I think that is something that is important, especially as we go forward and content creation becomes even more easy. For the work that USDA does, the work that the Census Bureau does, all of that information that they're outputting is of such value because it is rigorous, it's scientific, and it also provides this ground truth or trustworthiness that we all need to have as a touchstone or reference point.
I like it.
Yeah, and overall, it's, anything that happens in your daily life or any big development, ultimately at the core of it, most times there is federal government action, policy, and therefore data behind it. So it shouldn't be something that you have to be really expert in or hard to find. I mean, why can't anything that you read about be, instantly findable as far as what the underlying data is? I think it's still too hard, that it still requires a level of familiarity and understanding and, you can't instantly tie it to, something that's of public concern, and, it should be closer to that.
So I think the reasons that you've all just stated are really important in a conversation that more broadly is around open government, and the openness of government. And sometimes maybe the data component gets lost in that narrative, which is not necessarily a critique. There's a lot of important themes when we talk about openness of government, particularly in the role of civil society and the government institutions. But data being a foundational component of sharing information out to the American people helps with communication, narrative, and maybe even transparency. Chris, you mentioned accountability as a mechanism. So how important, based on what you've just described, would you articulate open data might also be for bolstering public trust? Is that part of how you might think about maybe a long-term outcome?
I definitely would agree with that. I think it's really about that ground truth and communicating what is actually happening in terms of a program being delivered. What is it to say that this program is serving this community but not that community? I mean, there's a lot of perceptions about who's getting served and who isn't, and we're able to put some data out there to validate that or to help clear up misperceptions or differences of perceptions about what's happening. So we do that. We look at, we're sharing data out down to the county level, the congressional district level, fairly granular levels of information to help communities understand where we're having impact and where we're having presence.
Any other reactions?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have in government this opportunity to really contribute to open science and show our work. This is how we're doing, critique it, let us know what you think. I think that it all opens up the opportunity to have an open conversation and a dialogue about the outcomes of what we do. We all want to be data driven. We all want to produce outcomes and be outcome driven. Well, here's the data to prove what happened and how we can get better over time. So to me, it's a commitment to that open learning and scientific approach of let's do better. Here's what happened. And we're going to iterate and move forward to improve those services and outcomes.
So let's pick up actually on that exact thread. I don't want to, yeah, I'll give you the opportunity also. Okay, you look like you were
Yeah,
gonna. So improving services, this administration, the Biden administration has an executive order on customer experience. And my organization, the Data Foundation, had a report a couple of years ago where we tried to articulate the critical role of using data, having open data assets as part of the efforts related to CX, including maybe even doing exactly what you're describing. Do you agree with that? Is there a clear role for the work that you're describing and the data cataloging efforts through data.gov and the inventories for improving our CX efforts, or GX as it's sometimes called? Jack, maybe I'll pick up with you based on your last comment.
Yeah, I mean, we capture so much telemetry. We have so many digital properties out there in the world that serve as a research lab so that we can find what are the pain points and what can we do better about them. And I think that not treating CX as an important issue is a way to have, it's a way for folks to have impasses to access in a lot of cases. If we don't make our digital properties accessible via smartphones, for example, when we have like a desktop version of it, you could be disenfranchising if you don't have a desktop machine. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we take CX seriously. It's not just pretty pictures and making sure that things look cool. It's really about making sure that people can get the services they need without having to jump through a million very odd technical hoops or go clear your cache. Things like that are brutal when it comes to scale problems, and we ultimately work at scale. So making sure that we hone our products and services to service the organization as best as possible is ultimately incumbent upon any product delivery that we do at the federal government. And we have to fix the damn website.
Say that last part.
So Robin, our administrator, said fix the damn websites, and I totally buy. I agree with that.
I guess I just gotta get you to cuss again. I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, no, okay.
Well, I'll jump in. I think, from my perspective, I think feedback is really important. We can do take 100 different actions. If we don't know what's working and what's not working from the perception of the customer, the person receiving the benefits, it's really hard to tell what we should stop doing, what we should do more of. Government resources are limited. I don't think we want to spend time on things that are not serving the public. They're not creating value. We want to do more of the things that are really effective. And so customer experience, feedback, pulse surveys, I think those are really helpful to be able to understand where an action we've done, a change that we've made has had real benefits, and maybe where it hasn't. We need to reassess and look for other opportunities. So I just think, customers' experience is really, for me, really a lot about feedback, telling us what's working, what we should be doing more of, and what we should.
And from the data.gov perspective, I think of it as, the executive order discusses the time tax that there still is on all of these transactions. And even though the focus of the EO is mainly on those, very well-known transactions that people have with the government, all of those activities though have data underlying it. And, that certainly should be part of the improvement in the customer experience and transparency. And then from our perspective, in the data sphere about improving customer experience, it's still not the best as far as being able to easily find data sets. So we know that we need to work on that. And also the element that I think we also need to work on, and that's both data.gov and the agencies, is the public interaction feedback aspect of open data, because it's meant to incorporate feedback as far as what the public is searching for, asking for, and I think we have work to do on
All right, let's pick up on that thread. So one of the things that I can say that you all probably shouldn't is now 5 years after the Open Government Data Act is law, there's still no memo from OMB telling agencies how to implement the law. So I think what you all just heard is there's an incredible amount of work actually happening to support implementation of the Open Government Data Act. So great work, everyone, and to all of your peers, thank you for the work that you're doing. But one of the things that we hope for and expect in that guidance is some conversation around things like the open data plans and how comprehensive data inventories are across the agencies and a whole host of other things that we would see for the community. So without opining from you on OMB, which I'm allowed to do, I'm curious to get a little bit of perspective from you as we start to bring civil society into this discussion about how we think about that value connection. So there are a lot of data sets that people want. And Chris, you mentioned government has limited resources. Yes, there's a lot of resources, we can't do everything. So the starting question is, how do we begin to prioritize what data sets should be open first? How do we start to think about, as we're producing more and more open data, transitioning into a system where we can actually both produce and make findable, searchable, using FAIR principles and such, the accessibility that the American public wants and needs. I'm not sure who to start with, but my instinct is to start with the only one of you that mentioned an OMB memo. So Kelly, we're going to start with you.
Okay. It's again, like anything else, it's sort of getting the data. And one of the things that we're working on that we haven't been able to prioritize, but we want to do better, is that we've had a gap in sharing or publishing regular metrics from data.gov itself. And, there are technical reasons for that and resource reasons for that, but that's one of the things that we'd like to improve soon, like in the near future, next month or so. Even though people do find, data on agency websites, it's something that would help agencies as well if we were regularly able to share with them from at least our website, from at least as far as all the USDA data sets. What are the top 10 this month, and how does that change? Does it reflect what's going on at the agency or particular activity? And that's something that's been lacking that we'd like to get back on track. So yeah, you have to see it. So there's the automated sort of tracking of that. I think we also could do more on looking at the feedback we get. I think because we're the central website that a lot of people land on, we get a lot of inquiries that we actually forward to our agency points of contact. It's about 1,500 questions or so a year. So it's also seeing, can we do more with that? Can we get more out of at least what we get from the public? Is there analysis we can do on that? And also, can we do something about the feedback mechanism itself? Because right now it's fairly manual. So that also on our roadmap is looking at, is there something that can sort of more readily get information about what people are asking about, even if it's still through us, to the agencies. Or an automated way.
Okay, Chris.
Well, I think, of course, priorities will change over time. And so the challenge is really kind of understanding what the current priorities are and trying to meet those. I think it can vary depending on the agency and the situation. One example I'll share is our Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service is responsible for animal health across the country. And one of the areas that's of significant concern right now is avian influenza. As they've been working to manage that, they've been having to answer lots of questions about what's going on, where are you seeing avian influenza, how significant is the problem? And they took that and used that to leverage releasing data sets. So we have some data products out on our website about the rates of avian influenza that we're detecting. So those are some of the ways we prioritize what data needs to be produced, what's urgent, what is the public really demanding right now. That's an important one. we also get asked a lot about where our dollars are going. So our rural development agency, who several years ago didn't think they had any data to put out publicly, has put out some really, I think, some fantastic products. They have something called a Rural Data Gateway, which now shares where rural RD investments are across the country. It highlights different segments, socially disadvantaged communities, and where money is going in relation to those communities. So it's really helping to answer multiple questions, but it's based on, some of it's based on things like priorities that are in the media. It could be based on questions that our leadership is getting. It could be based on FOIA. We've had some of our organizations that, like, I'm bogged down in pulling data for FOIA. Let's just put it out there. That's easier said than done, but it has been a driver for some of our work.
I'm a big fan of quality over quantity. I think it's easy-ish to release data in volume. I think it's harder to enter into a contract where that data product is something that you're going to maintain. And I think one of the things we're working on is trying to professionalize the data stewardship role in GSA, where we recognize that the amount of time it goes into curating a data set and making it useful and interviewing end users. How are you going to use this? And what can I do to make this data product better is something that is a valuable and worthwhile engagement. I also think that it's about meeting people where they are. And so making sure that our data products are as accessible as possible in as many different form factors as possible. And knowing the emerging and kind of evolving landscape of how people consume information, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our data products are in this stateless kind of form factor where you're not just pushing out PDFs, you're not pushing out CSVs, you're not pushing out Excel files, you're pushing out things that could be consumed by products that people are using. We know that people consume information in situ oftentimes. And now as we move forward in the landscape, it's going to start moving a lot more directly into LLMs. People will ask a question of that, where is that answer coming from and how are we doing our job in terms of disseminating information so that those LLMs can consume and understand what we're saying at the cell level. And that's a really hard and kind of unfocused problem, but I think it needs to be addressed. How can we improve the consumption or improve the accuracy and consumption of these machines as they start to harvest this data and routinely reinforce and harvest every single year? What can we do to do that?
So there's an incredible amount to unpack in what you all just described about how we can think about some kind of heuristic for both a value structure, but a prioritization structure on open data. And I think what I mostly heard, but not exclusively, was thinking about a demand function. So the more people ask for something, the more likely you are to get it. But Chris, you gave a really good example of, at least I thought it was a good example from rural development, where they didn't really have open data, but there was a value proposition about an impact that it was useful. And I maybe would just encourage, that's also a really important thing to think about is what's the societal or economic impact of an open data asset might be. So we have a lot of, right, census, it's written in the Constitution, collect population data, because we use it for a whole host of things, right? But there are so many other places where there may be open data assets that aren't being FOIA'd. Maybe some of us should be FOIAing them, that just have a huge phenomenal impact around major economic indicators or climate change instances, or, we come up with a list of things all day. So I think that would be a challenge for the community, the CDOs, the data governance professionals, the data stewards, civil society, to think about what we would suggest is that mechanism for relating it. Do you have any reactions about things that might?
The hidden gem problem is a great one because sometimes you produce something that is like the keystone product and that sucks the air out of the room, but you have all of these other really cool or interesting or impactful products that go under the radar because either they're being washed away by all the other disseminated products that are kind of the bread and butter of what that does, or they're just harder to consume or they're a different form factor. Like LEHD back at Census does all this really subtle, really amazing work. The loads data set was one of my favorites. It's where you work, how you commute, and that is incredibly important, hard to find. And it's not necessarily what you think of when you think of say Census, for example. And that exists across every single agency, is that we have so many So this like the demand signal, yes, it's important, but it's also a lagging indicator. Are there other things that we can look at that could help produce more value that people just don't know about? And then how can we disseminate that message? Hey, this is really helpful. This is really important. Go check it out.
So Hyun, let me come back to you because I said I was going to ask you about comprehensiveness.
Yeah.
So one of the ways of connecting the dots might be if the American public knows what data government collects in the first instance. And so this is maybe the question about the extent to which the inventories and catalogs could be not just comprehensive, but more searchable. Does that resonate with the work that you're doing? It sounds a bit like how you described it, but to what extent should we think about comprehensiveness as part of the charge?
Dating back to 1313 and also, the statute itself, the language has always been really broad. It said that agencies should have a metadata inventory about everything, all of their data assets. And so the comprehensive, we get this question a lot, but it's tough for us because we're the implementers of making sure that whatever it is, the metadata inventory, which is totally under the agency's control, is properly ingested into a catalog that's continually updating. And since our focus is on that, we tend to not, we're also not OMB, so we're not the ones trying to judge, how comprehensive is an agency's inventory from what we think is the whole. And, we wouldn't be in a position to know. It's really more, I think it would, each agency's point of contact probably has a better idea of how close the metadata inventory is to the whole. But I don't, the goal and the language has always been so broad. I think it's no secret that there's probably, a gap between what's in metadata inventories and what that whole is, and that it probably varies among agencies. So it's, we know that that's always been the goal, and it's always, we know that we're always striving toward it. But from our point of view, we don't tend to have a really strong sense of, what the agency metadata inventory is compared to, what's truly meant by all the policy law, which is, it should be everything, because you should be able to describe everything. So it's just the perpetual work in progress from our.
What is all?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let me ask one final question before we pivot to our forum and the bigger discussion with public. The role of civil society and those in the American public is really critical for that work. And you've all at some point alluded to the role of engagement, participation, feedback loops. What's the most helpful? I have fond of saying government is generally pretty bad at communicating with the American public. No offense. But part of the role of the GSA government secretariat is to improve communication with civil society. What do you need? What's the most helpful when hearing from those who are in civil society about valuing open data, what they need, maybe FOIAing you? Maybe you don't answer that one, but like, what are the things, what would be the most useful for the work that you're doing in this moment? Let's start with Zach. We'll come this way and then we'll wrap.
Consuming the services and complaining about them. Ruthless. Honest dialogue to me is the best form for us to get better. If you're quiet, or if it's like just good enough and you're not saying, hey, this could be better, I think that's an indicator that we can focus on the squeakier wheel. And so making sure that we're speaking honestly and directly to, hey, it would be better if this did that. And I know that can feel like a lot, and it's going to be hard for us to address every single one, but be patient with us and be durable through our updates if we don't address that specific question. I think that's the other part. We'll ask you, hey, what do you think? And you'll be like, it's this. And then we will send an update and it'll be like, you didn't fix this, so I'm not going to give you more feedback. Unfortunately, it's just, we desperately need to just keep reiterating the same.
I think, so a couple things from my perspective. I do try to understand what's being consumed as far as data. So if I look at our open data platform has metrics on what dashboards are being viewed and how often and what's trending. We get requests through data.gov for data sets that we go back through the organization, say, do we have this data? And can we put it out there? So those are some channels that are more like, some coming in through data.gov, some are just monitoring, but I think really understanding what's the underlying question that's being asked. I think it's one thing to say, put a data set out there. It really helps to understand what's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's the question you're trying to answer? Because sometimes, finding the right data set depends on understanding what the question is.
I would echo what Zach was saying. The catalog is a metadata catalog with download and access links that lead to any site where you're accessing or downloading the data set. And so there are no accounts, there's no way of us, tracking what people are doing with it. And in the past, we've made some efforts to see if we could draw out that information, if people would volunteer, like what they're using a particular data set for. There have been times where we put a button on the catalog page to see if people would submit, hey, I'm on this page and I used it for whatever. And we didn't collect a ton, it's purely voluntary. And it seemed that in order to, if you were to really look for the impact, we'd almost have to research it ourselves. And that's something that, we might not quite get to. So I would encourage telling us, if you really are using a federal agency data set, let us know. Okay? Like having a sample of, what you're using it for, it's very helpful when people ask us, like, what's the impact of having open data catalog? And same thing, if you're using it, but if it's insufficient, is it, not covering enough years? Is it not covering the entire topic? Is it, not sufficient in format for what you want to do with it? Let us know. I think just the more specific examples that are volunteered, it helps us because, we're not in a position to, someone probably could research, but we're not in a position to spend a ton of effort looking for it ourselves.
Yeah, I love these suggestions. What are the ways of thinking about how we can not only prioritize, but increase the value of open data at the same time? And what I hear you all suggesting and almost, well, I'll just say encouraging here is that civil society and the American public have a major role in contributing to exactly that message. So in that vein, that's what we're going to do. And I'm just going to say thank you all for sharing your insights, your perspectives, wonderful and perfect segue for the next part of the agenda. So if you'll join me in giving our speakers a round of applause. Dan, my thanks.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
back to you.
thank you, speakers. Thank you very much. We did get some questions for you all in the chat. Unfortunately, in order to have time for all the public speakers we have, we'll just wind up emailing you those and then we'll get back to folks in a public way. But thank you all. Thanks. All right. Let's extend my little time to work. All right, so I think Natalie, there we are. Maybe start lining up speakers.
All right, how many of you are familiar with lightning talks? Great, I'm gonna keep my instructions short. By moderation, my job is to make sure that you only do this for 3 minutes. I will push you out of the way. So the way we wanna do this is there are people who have signed up to do these lightning talks. I'm gonna call your name. If you know you signed up, please try sitting over here, but I'm only gonna call a name once and I'm gonna look at the timer from then on. The timer will include your time in introducing yourself. The timer will include your time getting up here. At about 30 minutes left in your time, I'm going to get up from the seat and I am going 30 seconds, sorry, 30 seconds from the time that it's time for you to get off the stage, I am going to move closer to you and closer to you and closer to you until we're both very uncomfortable. And then I will go, time's up. Well, we don't have a mic. Can't take a mic out your hands, but I will just push you to the side and we'll ease over for the next person. Don't hate me. I love you. It's just my job. All right. So if you know you've signed up, please sit over here. I'm looking for, we're going to do this in 2 rounds. The first round is in-person people, and then we're going to have a round for virtual people that have also signed up. In person will be 30 minutes a time. Virtual will also get another 30 minutes. I'm Natalie, by the way. I'm Executive Vice President for the Data Foundation. So I'm looking for Lydia Cooley, Mike and Lydia. Mike Endale, Taylor Swift. Come on up, come on up. These are your seats to get things started. We're gonna tee up before you start the timer. We're gonna tee up Alexander Howard, Jason Magruder, Sarah. I almost got it. All right, thank you. All right.
Before you start,
Okay.
mouse no longer responding. Excellent. All right, folks online, do you see the speakers? Anyone? Excellent.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, just want to make sure that we have like my backup screen where I actually get to see who's talking. All right, so with that, first speaker.
Do you want me to use my timer or because I can't see? Someone's-
Yeah, well, that's the problem statement.
I'll use mine.
Excellent, even better.
All right. All right, Lydia? Of course. You want to stand, sit? What do you want to do?
I'm fine.
Okay. And you're good.
Thank you, Lydia Cooley. I have a background in data science and data engineering and used to work at Treasury. So my first thought preparing for this talk today was to talk to you all about application and programming interfaces, APIs and sort of what data engineers need. But then I started to think back on some of my time at Treasury as a federal employee and remembered the Data Act, which we've talked about today, and the team who led a lot of that work, who may be online. Hello there if you are. I was affiliated and got a chance to witness firsthand a lot of that effort back then. They were so insightful, and this panel reminded me of it. I think it was Zach talking about product orientation. They did that 10 years ago. With Data Act, they thought about data products and having product managers. And that at the time, that was pretty new to government, and now thankfully has become pretty commonplace. And so I wanted to share that documentation is still around. If you kind of look on GSA or Treasury or Data Foundation or some of the 18F websites, you can find those artifacts, and they're still really relevant. I looked at them yesterday. So the folks I remember were Renata Measures Misko and Mindy Levitt were some of the friends there. They're probably still willing to help for those of you who are in government and want to learn from their work. The second piece that was really insightful way back then that's turned out to be true is that Agile works. Iterative processes work, interacting with the users works. Back then, we knew that kind of, but there were still a lot of questions about whether that would pan out for such a big effort. This was kind of the first time so many agencies had worked together on one set of data standards. So it took a lot of iteration. And so that turned out to be true. Want to share that. And then it was the citizen or user experience kind of obsession that they had back then that still applies. And so I would encourage all of you. I think the role for civil society is to check us on that. Those of us in government and our contractors, keep an eye on us on that and help us prioritize, because that is a reflection of our values as a society. What we prioritize. We always say the budget is a reflection. I think the data sets are also as much of a reflection of what we care about as a society. So I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you all.
I love this kind of moderation. Go ahead, Mike.
Right, I got my own time. So my name is Mike Mbale. I am with a company called Blankport. We're a digital services company here based in DC. So when the open data platform in 2009 was announced, we were early in adopting some of that, and we are helping Department of Education to open up their data portal back in 2011, 12, thereabouts. And we looked at, all of the things, all of the lessons we learned as we developed. So one of the insight that, and we're currently actually supporting the patent of this open data portal. And one of the things that we learned from that experience is the need for that data not only being open, but actually having an interface. So the data usage went up exponentially after we introduced the API layer on the data, because it was much easier for anybody that's building any product to just quickly grab it and build something on top of it. And in addition to that, I think in the coming years, I think one thing, collectively we can think about is how to incorporate some of these LLM models on top of it. I know AI is conversation for everyone, but I think the ground truth in the data has a lot of insights, and the opportunity, I think, will be once people understand the value of this data by using natural language, they can build anything downstream very quickly. I think that would be the key that would unlock the full potential of the open data platform. Another thing is the use of open source tools to actually, when publishing some of these platforms. Early on, when we started supporting data.ed.gov, and after that, developer.usdata.gov, one of the things that the key important lesson that we learned is actually sharing some of these open data publishing platforms, because internally the burden is real, right? If making sure the data is shaped the right way, and publishing the data to the public, and all of that is actually a fairly cumbersome process. And in order to do that, we open source a couple of products that we built for Department of Education. So I think that kind of support from GSA or USDA or anybody that's like working on the open data side can use a lot of it. I think from the policy point of view, it makes the cost lower because of shared experiences. But only on the consumer side, I think building out these APIs out of the box will go a long way into actually getting this data consumed. That's my time.
And then,
Hey everyone, my name is Taylor Swift. I promise it's real. I get jokes all the time. I just shake it off. So. There's people in this room that have heard that joke. I am our Director of Government Capacity at the Popbox Foundation, and we are extremely passionate about using technology to make government work better for the American people and constituents around the world for all levels of government. And we spent the first couple of months this year releasing our first volume of how legislative bodies around the world are adopting to the use of AI. And we're actually about to publish our second volume, probably later on this year. Really excited to see civil society, government agencies, and kind of the general public continue to adopt these things, kind of seeing like a uniform starting line. And actually want to give a ton of credit to the federal government and Congress for kind of being ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff, which is pretty fantastic. Also want to take a moment to appreciate the administration, the steps they've taken to talk about AI inventories and the use of federal agencies with the AI executive order and the OMB guidance, and of course, the Department of Commerce's RFI for the AI open government data assets. We will be definitely submitting comments, and we encourage everybody to also submit comments. So it's pretty crazy to think that things were just very PDF based, download based CSVs, and now we're all the way to APIs. So I'm excited to continue to push this. Yeah. Yeah, just thanks so much. That's all I got.
thank you. All right, we've got time to spare. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I will also plus one that we need good data to do good AI. Let's bring up Alexander Howard, Justin Magruder, Sarah Shaw, David Schneider. They have all enough people to bring up seats.
Pretty soon in the world, and where are we supposed to speak for just
Doesn't matter to me.
secret?
Just remind speakers, speak up so folks online can hear.
I guess this is a widescreen camera.
It goes from the end of that screen to the end of that.
I think the video is on. Did you know that the video looks like it's turned on?
No, so they can see online.
Oh.
Eventually, this will be on YouTube.
Yep.
All right, are we ready? And I've been told to give a 1 minute warning, not a 30-second. There you go, Sarah.
Thanks. American federalism creates a complex challenge to open government AI and general use of open data. By the way, can everybody hear me with my mask on? Excellent, thank you. Why is our style of governance so challenging for open data? It's because with state and local levels controlling much of the data collection and reporting to federal, we have under standardized and otherwise known as semantic heterogeneity. And as a result, we struggle to know emerging trends on the ground. We're left somewhat flat-footed in emergencies and emerging pandemics. Our modern age requires knowing what's happened today, not a month or a year ago. Our decentralized governance and open data systems aren't AI ready, as 80% of the open government data requires wrangling and cleaning to be useful. Many local, county, and state governments still don't have access to open data tools, and their vendors often own the machine-readable versions of the data public employees have inputted. I believe that our country's semantic heterogeneity across open data holds us back from being more open and effective at emerging issue response and serving the American people. My name is Sarah Schott. I'm an open government professional with nearly 20 years of experience in our field. I've written 2 data standards in public health, the Lives and Safe Data Standards, the latter on contract with the National Environmental Health Association and the CDC. As a former Beck Sutter Fellow, I produced research on 50 states' COVID data and how the semantic heterogeneity of that data could be reduced with simplified data schemas. Recently, I developed the first certificate program for congressional staff data skills for Congress produced by USD Facts. I believe the U.S. government open data or open government action plan must include quantifiable goals on producing shared schemas for commonly collected government data. But how do we do that without being weighed down? First, let's stop using the term standards and use shared schemas. Produce a tiger team that can identify high priority data that is currently unstandardized, and engage relevant public employee associations who serve as an educational and convening role as experts in the field to bounce these shared schema concepts off of and to kind of use an agile methodology. And finally, 2 points, keep it simple. To increase participation by states and locals, limit required fields wherever possible to 10 to 15 required fields with up to 30 optional fields. And perhaps leverage community grants from Senate appropriations to fund local implementation and staff training for shared schemas and pilot programs, particularly ETL tools. AI-ready, open, and shared schemas, thank you, would just be easier for me. Shared data.
You almost got it all in there. We'll do Alexander Howard.
So my name is Alex Howard. I was at the first open data conference the US hosted back in 2009. I was the journalist there at the time. I live streamed it. We had Tim Berners-Lee. It was super cool. And boy, 15 years later, we're still seeing PDFs go online. I'm sorry, it's not cool. There was a discussion just now talking about CF, studies these PDFs. No, let me just read you from the Open Government Data Act, which I helped work on was the Sunlight Foundation. The term open government data asset means a public data asset that is machine readable, available in an open format, and not encumbered by restrictions other than IP rights. They would impede the use or reuse of it based on an underlying open standard that is recognized. We are being held back. Nick was very nice. The Office of Management and Budget was instructed in this act, which passed 2018, signed into law in 2019, 5 years ago, to issue guidance to agencies that this is the default for our country. We are now gathering information. It needs to be in an open format. It will make it more accessible inside. It'll enable people to get insight outside. And instead, what we've seen is open data almost become a form of propaganda. It is what government puts online. It is not what people are able to get when they use the FOIA to request from government. I'm glad it came up in the discussion earlier, because it is a reality that what we've seen is our governments are posting information in the formats they feel like, and not giving us information that we need to in a way that would enable us to mill insight. It's the raw materials of our democracy. And so we see things like arms transfers to other countries that are not detailed. We see the systematic blinding of the American public by not posting our data around disease, around a historic pandemic. This is a problem at every level of government. And if we don't see leadership from the White House on down, I'm so grateful to the GSA for continuing to wave this flag and all of the civil servants and the CDOs who shared their insight today. But if we don't see the United States government at the highest level reclaim leadership, this will not become a priority for the agencies. We need to see a new open government executive order. We need to see guidance, and we need to see new commitments made in the National Action Plan, which commit to full implementation of this before the end of 2025. This isn't an option. This is something that we all need to see action on, so the American people with information need to be self-governed.
Thank you. Okay, you feel like 30 seconds to spare.
So open data. and GSA CDO just stood up there and said, give us feedback. Go to, right to opendata@gsa.gov.
My bad, I shouldn't have told you that.
Give me a moment. You take a break.
Jason Magruder,
Justin, yeah,
Justin, sorry, I can't
that's
read.
all right.
Justin.
Nice to see you. Justin Magruder, I'm the Chief Data Officer for SAIC. We're a Fortune 500 systems integrator for the US government. Our customers are the US government agencies in military, civilian, space, and intelligence agencies. We help to deliver some of the most sophisticated and robust solutions for our government. I'm new to government about 3 or 4 years ago. I came here after about 28 years on Wall Street, building systems for big banks. I'm going to give you some background to give you context of what we're talking about now. I started with a company called JP Morgan about 30 years ago to lead their global reference data services program. I had no idea what that was at the time. It took me about a year to figure out why I was there, but we rolled out a platform that is still in operation today, which is how they set up all their customers, the instruments they trade. And it was a pretty cool solution for mid-90s, pretty out in front. I spent most of my career doing the same kind of thing for a number of other bulge bracket banks and market utilities. And about 3 or 4 years ago, as COVID was ramping up, I decided to jump into SAIC. It seemed like a really neat thing to do, and I'm extremely happy I did it. People in banking are really cranky. People in government are really good. I really enjoy the environment. I'll say though, along the way, I got involved in some standards setting programs. I'm going to talk about standards today. Back in the late 90s, my team and I wrote the first specification for a protocol called FPML, Financial Products Markup Language, which is a way to trade derivatives across boundaries seamlessly between big banks. I also helped work on XBRL, FixML, and a couple of other protocols that banks and investors and market utilities and government use to exchange information at ultra low latency, ultra high speed. And then integrate that data, manage the risk of those trades in real time. We got pretty good at it because we had so much regulatory oversight from some of the people in this room probably. I'm here to talk about standards, and that's what we've been focused on at SAIC. We've been focused on helping develop and deliver standards for the exchange of data. And we think that's the key to open data success in the future. We love what data.gov does. We love what GSA is doing. I'd like to give some feedback to Alex on the UBI. We can do that offline, but he did want to hear from Squeaky Wheels, so I'll let him know that. And I think that the value of standards is clear. First of all, we want to be interoperable. We want to be able to exchange information without having people that interact with systems. We'd like to get to what we used to call a straight-through process, where we don't have people reaching in to fix things so a transaction can be processed. Standards.
We have a debate on standards versus shared schemas.
That's okay.
Thank you all. Oh, wait,
Still here.
you're still here. Sorry, are you David?
I am still David.
David Schneider.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Schneider. I'm a data scientist with the Federal Transit Administration's Office of Research. The Federal Transit Administration is part of US DOT, and our mission is to improve public transportation for America's communities. And one of the ways that we do that is by helping transit systems become more resilient to extreme weather events. So I want to tell a quick story about some work that we did with the Census Bureau's Open Innovation Lab. Shout out to any census people here. To help design some digital tools to help make transit systems, particularly bus systems, more resilient. So the Census Bureau runs a project called the Opportunity Program, which brings together government officials, people in the private sector, and people in nonprofit worlds to help design some digital platforms generally to help make people's lives better. So we put together a problem statement that talked about ways to do this for transit.
And we recruited some people from tech companies and some people that were user advocates that give tech companies feedback in a kind of agile process where tech companies develop some platforms using some open data, including general transit feed specification data, which is data on the locations of bus routes and bus stops, data on extreme weather, and data on demographics of people. Ultimately, what came out of that were a couple really interesting tools. There's one tool that that talks about what I call hot bus stops. So you can go to a website and look at bus stops in cities around the country and look at surrounding tree canopy and look at surrounding heat wave risk. And we hope that that will help transit agencies focus on putting shelters or other mitigations on those stops that are most at risk, especially for people in predominantly minority and low-income communities that don't often get historically the services that they deserve over the decades. Another product focused on flood risk, focused on New York City and other places, and overlaid bus stops with flood risk. Similar idea. How can we take proactive action to address those issues? And finally, we had one, we did a little bit more innovative that a company used dashboard cameras to look at infrastructure, including bus stops that were maybe broken or a light was out, so they could do some proactive work. So this is some of our project, and in the last few minutes of my time, or a few seconds of my time, I will tell some jokes. I will tell jokes about states. So what did Delaware? He wore his New Jersey. What did Tennessee? She saw what Arkansas. What did Mississippi? She sipped a mini soda. Thank you.
Yes.
Daniel Schumann,
Using that.
why not? You want to last to be in person? You get the whole floor to yourself.
Do I get 3 times 4, 12 minutes?
Unfortunately, no.
I will not go up.
Okay. Ready?
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel. It's good to be seeing so many friends in this room. So we've been talking about looking forward. I want to talk about looking back for a second. We're talking about open and accountable government, transparency, which is built in our country, in the nature, very fabric of our country. It's built into the Constitution. Postal roads and newspapers were the ways that we originally communicated this type of accountability information. The US government subsidized the ability to send mail in the early 19th century as a way of making sure that people could share information about what was happening. They also published the laws and federal regulations in the newspaper. In the 1860s, we set up the government publishing office as a central clearinghouse for information that we all need. And we saw similar efforts in the 1930s with the archives. The effort to manage information, to make sure that we have and can hold our government accountable has been with us since the founding of the country, if not before. Now, we're in a different era, right? We're not dealing with microfiche, hopefully, right? We are still dealing with printed matter. We're dealing with PDFs, which are not data. And a former colleague of mine said that he hated PDFs, and I think that he's probably right about that. But we're also in the midst of a different type of information revolution, one with AI. And AI runs on ingesting information and trying to use that as a basis to predict what the next word is, to provide context on information. But there's an old saying about garbage in, garbage out. If you train AI on garbage, then you get garbage. And the best source of high quality, reliable information produced by experts is the federal government. So not only is open information useful for transparency and accountability, in fact, I think that is its most important purpose, it is now commercially important as well. And we may not be feeling it yet, although AI has come a couple times during the conversation today. I think AI is going to be driving significant changes in demand for government information. So as we think about how we respond to user signals, how we sort of create that feedback loop, we should be thinking about as well where the commercial side is going to be putting additional forms of pressure on this and how we can respond to it in advance. Thank you very much.
Transition online now.
That's an excellent question. Maybe if you line up 2 or 3 folks, my folks can make sure they're muted and highlighted correctly online.
I can do this. So I just call out names.
Let's go with that.
Dr. Saud Al-Shauli. Raise your hand if you're online. Or speak. Present. All right, Stephen Buckley.
I can't raise my hand, but I'm speaking.
Perfect. I just need to know you're here. You ready?
Sure. Where's the clock? Is it
Uh,
showing?
So I have a clock in front of me. What I can do is when you get to 1 minute left, I'm gonna go 1 minute.
Good, thank you.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
okay. So how about you get ready to go? Oh, you have a clock?
Try it.
Yeah.
All right, we can also experiment with the clock while we do this. But wait for me to say a minute, just in case this doesn't go well. All right, ready, set, go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Stephen Buckley, and I'm with the US chapter of the International Association for Public Participation. And for the past 15 years, I've been attending the open government meetings that were started by President Obama on his first day in office. And so I have been trying to nudge them towards using best practices based on metrics. But metrics meaning measuring sticks based on data. I mean, using data in order to figure out what are the best practices for public participation, meaning the public is participating in the decisions that affect their lives. So things like, for instance, where do we put the new bus shelters like the previous gentleman was talking about? You could use data and all this other stuff, all of the kind of data sets, or you could actually have some kind of forum like this one, like Zoom, where people are allowed to say, hey, you should put one right here. And if they don't feel like they're being listened to, then they can give it a rating, which will create data to say whether or not the meetings were best practices or not. And that's why you can see if Maryland does better than Virginia, or this county does better than that county. And that's the type of data that I'm hoping I will certainly bring it up next week in the listening session that the OMB is having for leading practices instead of best practices, but it's the same thing. How do you figure out what's working and what's not, and what are the standard ways of doing that? And because right now you've got a million different organizations, and also every federal agency has their own best practices for public participation. And so the idea of standard practices, standard measurements, standard data under a federal framework is wonderful. So that's the idea, is that, and I'll put my information on the spectrum of public participation, which if you were to Google participation spectrum, you'll see that everybody's been using our chart to create their own and adapt it, but we're the original spectrum. So I'll put that in the chat. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up is Sansara Cannon. Are you here? Sansara, if I'm saying it right. Sansara Cannon. Okay, we're gonna go to Tambra Dunhams. Tambra. All right. Alina.
Sorry, Tamara is online. I can see if she can unmute. Just in case we haven't checked.
She is, okay. Tambra, calling once. You have to hear you to participate? No? Okay. Alina Guerra? Alina? Mark Jaffe?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Nice.
All right, and then after Mark will be, 1 second, Mark, and then after Mark will be, we're teeing you up. And then after Mark will be Brendan Mapes.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, so you're gonna go after Mark. Are you gonna do their big
We'll
face?
try.
Are you gonna do full screen so that they can't see the hockey and big face?
Well, I think they can see the clock. I think we can. I'm changing screens.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna start Mark now. Go, Mark.
Great. Thanks for organizing today's forum and for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Mark Jaffe. I'm on the board of XBRL US. I would like to highlight delays in the executive branch's implementation of the Grant Reporting Efficiency and Agreements Transparency, or GREAT Act of 2019. Under this bipartisan legislation, the government was supposed to promulgate machine-readable data standards for grant documents and federal single audits by the end of 2022. Unfortunately, this has not occurred, but now that the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, I hope that OMB, HHS, and GSA will move forward with releasing and implementing these standards. With federal grantees spending over $1 trillion annually, it is essential for oversight agencies and interested citizens to be able to analyze grant data. By replacing PDFs filed by grantees with machine-readable documents, GREAT Act implementations would vastly improve the ability to conduct such analysis. Although GREAT Act implementation appears to have stalled within the federal government, a lot of progress has been made by external stakeholders that federal agencies can leverage. XBRL US, working in conjunction with member organizations, has developed a taxonomy for grant and single audit filings. We then applied this taxonomy to grant filings produced by the College of DuPage, a large Illinois community college district, producing sample machine-readable inline XBRL documents consistent with the GREAT Act's legislative intent. With respect to single audits, a new flurry of work is occurring in association with the Financial Data Transparency Act enacted in 2022. FDTA requires machine-readable disclosure from governments and nonprofits participating in the municipal bond market. The annual financial statements these bond issuing entities produce are often identical to the federal reporting package they include with their single audits. So FDTA implementation work is directly relevant to the GREAT Act. To assist with FDTA implementation, the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, is creating a reporting taxonomy that will borrow from XBRL US's work. Ultimately, FDTA implementation will be the responsibility of the US Securities and Exchange Commission. I recommend that OMB, HHS, and GSA work with both the SEC and non-governmental organizations to push machine-readable state and local government financial reporting forward. The GREAT Act can have a great impact on our understanding of grantee financial performance, but only if and when it is finally implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Pause this. Okay, Brendan, you're up next. After Brendan is Shelley.
I'm here.
Hey, Shelley. And then after Shelley will be Joel Natividad. Natividad?
Natividad, thank you.
Okay, so Brendan, then Shelley, then Joel. You ready, Shelley? Oh, wait, yeah, no, Brendan. You ready, Brendan?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. You can start now.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Brendan Mapes. I'm here speaking on behalf of Public Policy Lab. We are a design research, service innovation, civic innovation firm based in New York, and we work alongside government agencies to rethink how they deliver social services. And we do that through design research and qualitative research with end users of those services. Today, I just wanted to share a little bit about one of our projects that has some themes of open data. It's actually a different sort of open data research with our end users about their experience with a government program. So we've conducted, the name of our project, which I'll share in the chat, a link to, is the Public Perspective Longitudinal Understanding Study of 65 plus adults, or plus 65. We've researched with older adults throughout the country, their experience engaging with various government programs like Medicare and Medicaid to manage their health care, among others, to just hear about their experience doing so and how those programs are working for them. So in this work, we will be rolling out a public platform to allow hopefully policymakers and other researchers and members of the public to engage with the data we've collected. It'll be published in the form of, video clips and sound bites, as well as transcripts of these interviews that we think really demonstrate the experience of these folks engaging with government services. And we hope that it can be used to innovate how these services are delivered and ultimately improve the experience of these folks. So we'll roll out that platform this summer. So we're engaging with questions of how to standardize the data we produce. It is primarily qualitative data. So we think there'll be some new questions to explore about how to standardize that and make it digestible and actionable for policymakers. But looking forward to getting that data out there and grappling with those questions. So I'll share a link to our project. If anyone's interested in learning more, I'll also drop my email, and we'll be doing some more public share outs about our work as we publish that data. But just wanted to share about that work. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Brendan. Shelley Metzenbaum?
Okay, hi, guys. I come at this, I'm delighted to talk to a group of people who are so interested in open data. And I want to challenge all of us to really think about why we want open data. I think that's really a very interesting question. So that's what I want to talk about today. And I come at this as someone who's been very involved in government performance management as well as evidence-informed management for a very long time. And one of the challenges is, in the performance management and evidence-informed management areas, we've too often assumed that the data is about judging the federal programs or the state and local programs or nonprofit programs to see if they work or don't, instead of thinking about the data as something to help the programs and others, for 4 different purposes: to inform where they focus, whether it's for resource allocation or where you're putting your staff time on enforcement action and assistance action. Second, to find ways to improve. And that is to, hey, who are the positive outliers there? If we replicate what they did, does it work in other places? All other places or just some? And then once we find better practices, to increase the adoption of better practices while reducing the use of less effective ones. And again, data can be very helpful there. And then finally, to build understanding of the choices governments make about their priorities and strategies, progress, challenges, lessons learned, and hopefully build trust in government. And so that's what I would argue to you are the uses of the data that we want to be open. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Just let's be clear about this and think about, data as a flashlight, not as a hammer. And I think the data can be useful on multiple dimensions of performance. One is improving outcomes. Another is improving operational quality, how easy it is to apply for a program or something like that. And then the third is transparency to improve outcomes and operational quality, to inform individual and organizational choice, to inform democratic debate about goals and strategies, and to build understanding of and trust in government and those it supports. The challenges are, I think we don't really understand how we want to use the data. Secondly, a lot of times we set up these incentives linked to the data that make people afraid of the data. Think of what we did to the teachers with the kindergarten to 12 data. It's just appalling. And then finally, we have a lot of clearance hurdles and other administrative burdens. So this group, let's really think about users. We talk about user-centered design, but we really need to manage that way and use the data to find ways to do better. And if you disagree with me, then I challenge you to say, what are the questions you think we want data to answer?
Hi, thank you, Shelley. Joel?
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Joel. I've been working with Open Data since 2010. And I'm here to advocate for open source and open standards and open schemas. So one analogy I often make is, consider the 20th century where we built bridges, railroads, highways, physical infrastructure. None were hindered by proprietary constraints. Instead, they were all built using open standards so that enabled an ecosystem of multiple vendors building, innovating, collaborating. Similarly, when the early internet that was made possible by the US government, granted they were funded by the Department of Defense, ARPANET, TCP/IP, but because they were built that way and it was opened up in the early 90s, it blossomed into an ecosystem that makes what we take for granted today possible, right? And now imagine a world where we clung to the proprietary networks of yesteryear like CompuServe, Podigy, and AOL. Do you think we would have had the digital richness we enjoy today if we stuck with those proprietary networks with proprietary protocols like IPX, SPX, Token Ring? I don't think so. So that's why I think with open data, we should follow that same script that has worked before. It's heartening to note I've been following the Evidence Act, and just last month they published as a recommendation status the DCAT US version 3 metadata standard. And that basically sets a standard way for government to describe and catalog its vast data assets. And I'm convinced actually that it will set the standard, not just for government, and much like a lot of things, that they will filter down into state and locals and even to the private sector, and hopefully enable that long vision of Tim Berners-Lee to have that web of data. And digital public infrastructure needs to be built with open source and open standards. It cannot be built on proprietary rent-seeking solutions from GovTech vendors whose business models depend and require lock-in and limited on interoperability. So the government has traditionally been the custodian of the commons, digital commons. So I'm hoping it can leverage its market-making procurement system to really lock in this open standards. It will really enable, in my mind, a prosperous digital future and enable the 21st century government we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kate Nicholson. And then,
Hey.
hi, and then Chris Stoner will go after her. And then
Great.
Ryan.
And I think,
I'm sorry.
sorry, I was going to add, I think Zachary Fader is going to join my discussion as well, if he's in the room.
There, and you want to, and that's how you want to do it? Let's go. And then
Cool.
Ryan will be after Chris. Okay, Kate and Zachary.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Nicholson from New York City, and I direct the public programs and partnerships at Beta NYC. Beta NYC believes that the success of any open data program depends on diverse people knowing how to use this data, and that such efforts foster civic engagement, enhance government services, and promote transparency. Our organization does three things to this end. We have a fellowship that cultivates public interest technology leaders from New York City universities. We have a civic innovation lab that addresses local technology and data needs through a free civic help desk for community organizations and government offices. And we run a bunch of public data literacy programs that educate and engage New Yorkers in partnership with the Open Data team, where Zachary manages the Open Data program at the Office of Technology and Innovation. Two programs that I'd just like to quickly highlight are our Open Data Ambassadors program, which recruits, trains, and certifies cohorts of volunteer ambassadors to teach about open data across New York City in their communities. Additionally, Open Data Week is held annually in March, and it's a festival that brings together thousands of people at dozens of events to offer insight and expertise and celebrate the ways that New Yorkers are using open data. We're deeply encouraged by our open data community's growth and its impact on the open data program's success. So I'll share more links into the chat and a way to contact me. But I'm going to pass the floor over to Zachary, who's going to tell you about the open data program in New York.
Yeah, perfect timing, and thanks, Kate. It's sort of eerie how familiar a lot of the challenges and problems people are describing are for our work. Again, I'm Zachary Fader. I lead this New York City's open data program and team, and our team is part of the city's Office of Data Analytics, which is inside the larger Technology and Innovation Office. It's a 5-person team. We work on policy and governance, data engineering, technical support, training, and engagement. And a lot of this work is with a network of about 100 open data coordinators, one in every New York City office, government office, agency, and commission, guiding them to how to identify, structure, document, maintain, and share public data. And this role is a legal requirement. New York City's open data law was first passed in 2012 and helps us set standards for things like what qualifies as a public data set. And from our perspective, open data really isn't open until it's actively used and critically examined. And it's sort of this virtuous cycle of engagement and broader usage by our own staff, but also community organizations, advocacy groups, companies, libraries, schools. And the idea is usage is a key driver for improving data quality, which in turn drives more usage. And with that, educating people is actually something that educating people specifically around open data is something that's in our office's charter. You can get in touch with our team at nyc.gov/askopendata. Would love to talk more with people. And I'll also put my contact info in the chat as well.
Thank you. Chris Stoner?
Hi there. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name is Chris Stoner. I'm the Open Environmental and Geospatial Data Lead on the AWS Open Data Program. If you're not familiar with AWS, it's Amazon Web Services. We're a cloud provider. We provide cloud services and storage. And the Open Data Program at AWS leverages those cloud services to provide data open to the public. We have a registry of open data with over 100 petabytes of data, again, free and open to the public for the most part. There are over 500 data sets ranging from environmental data from providers like NOAA and OpenAQ to geospatial data from providers like NASA and USGS. To health and genomics data from the Allen Institute. And if you've heard of ChatGPT, because we've all heard of ChatGPT, we even have Common Crawl. That's a monthly crawl of the entire internet, contains over 80% of the tokens that are used to train large language models. So these various providers, NOAA, NASA, USGS, et cetera, they put the data into AWS and manage what's available to the public, so the data is not reformatted or modified in any way by AWS. And this gets back to what one of the panel speakers said earlier about maintaining provenance. And also the data has a permissive license, so you can really use it for commercial interests as well as open science. So why put data in the cloud? Really, for us, if you use the data where it resides and bring your compute workloads to the data, you won't have to wait days to weeks to download the data before starting your analysis. We believe it's important to make these data available to advance science as well as industry, and we advocate for growing the public footprint of open data. You may wonder, so, okay, there's all this wonderful data up in the cloud. How is it used? We have drought and flood monitoring from space with Blue Dot Observatory, remote forest fire monitoring using NOAA JPSS from Sentinel-1 from NASA, mapping of the COVID-19 genome. This data set we provided early during COVID so that we could help researchers determine how the genome was going to mutate over the course of COVID-19. Energy sector using NOAA data to determine if the solar or wind farm will produce enough energy if we build at this location, and of course, generative AI with Common Crawl. And really the base layer for all generative AI workloads is data, and the more large data sets we provide to the public, the more we'll advance this space. So if you want to learn more about the Open Data Program, you can find us at opendata.aws, and I'll put my contact information in the chat. Open data advances open science, but also other government agency, commercial sector, and nonprofit folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ryan Wold?
Oh, hi there. Hi.
You can go now.
Okay. In the context of software systems, data is both an input and an output to many functions that people are on both sides of. and it's important that the data is open to both federal staff and often to the public to support transparency and foster trust in public service delivery. I'm going to comment on 3 topics today. One is data as a strategic asset. 2 is a socio-technical perspective. And 3, customer feedback as data. So data as a strategic asset. I wanted to outline what I understand to be the foundations of data as a strategic asset within the context of why open data matters for government customer experience and performance. The federal data strategy at strategy.data.gov outlines this. Open Government Data Act as well. Evidence-based policy making legislation in 2016 and 2018 also speak to this, as well as Section 280 of the OMB Circular A11, the President's EO on customer experience in the last couple of years, and the more recent memo M2322 about delivering a digital-first public experience. And given data is an asset, it deserves at least the same level of discipline one might find managing fixed assets, such as computers or cars from a CFO's office. Number 2, about a socio-technical perspective. Software systems are not a sufficient lens when we're talking about customer experience. Socio-technical connotes both systems with their data, plus the people involved. So socio-technical systems are the base unit. Cybernetics gets at this very well, and I think it's important to acknowledge the extensive amount of study, vocabulary, and insights cybernetics has yielded in the past 70 or so years. Again, we're talking about people and systems together, co-evolving very rapidly. And finally, customer feedback as data. I've supported civic engagement, open government, public comments, and customer experience professionally for more than 10 years. Software is used to communicate and provide an interface to gather input from citizens, and that feedback is ultimately a form of data, but the data itself is inert, and the feedback data does not yield value until it's interpreted and acted on by humans for the purpose of delivering services and ideally improving that service delivery. Generally, as been mentioned today, we should be seeking to reduce the size of feedback loops where possible, which results in improved responsiveness. I've seen a large gap in open data in terms of business process models. BPMN, or business process model notation, is a standard that's been around for more than 20 years. Importantly, it's a form of data and is quite suitable to be more open for the purposes of increasing situational awareness for organizations and the people they serve. Process models are structured, standardized data, and they yield many benefits of open data, like querying, aggregation, and summarizing. So making more process models can lead to better organizational design, which enables better customer support in support of better performance and better awareness of how people interact with open data.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm gonna do a last call for Tambra Dunhams, because we still see you there. No? All right. Those are all the speakers. I turn it back to.
Yes, I'm next. I'm playing a little bit of both clicky and speaking. So
You need some help?
yeah, you clicky.
I can clicky.
Excellent. This is the mouse on the right. Right, left. Excellent. So surveys. Our original plan was to have a survey that we do in the room with folks online and have a big collaborative like results session right now. That didn't happen. So instead, we're going to send out a survey afterwards to everyone that registered, as well as some other questions about the event today, how it went, things we do better, things we can improve upon, ideas for next time, that type of thing. So you'll be getting a Google form after the event, most likely Monday, to participate that way. Next clicky. No clicky. Just the screen anyway. Boom. Closing remarks, right? Here I'm gonna invite Mr. Nick up. Tony is getting ready for the next event, so he's not able to join us for closing remarks, but there were a couple things I wanted to mention on my handy dandy note card here. So there are many ways for the public to participate. There's a public participation community engagement RFI, which is out right now for public comment. It closes May 17th. We'll have it open for 60 days. We do hope everyone participates in that and helps shape how the government includes government participation in the future. We're also having a public session on that with the White House on May 2nd. So please register to participate in that virtual session. So we can again get that input directly to the White House that way. The grants business standards are also out for public comment. That also closes May 17th, oddly enough. I didn't plan it that way, but there you go. Hope to get your FOIA, not grants. FOIA business standards. Immediate correction. Excellent. The fifth National Action Plan self-assessment was published a little while ago on RFI as well. We're looking for feedback on that. That closes June 10th is what I have down. Thank you, Alexis, to confirm. And lastly, if you go to the Federal Register right now and you search for GSA, you search for things last 30 days, and you go to the public inspection section, you will see that tomorrow a RFI on the Open Government Federal Advisory Committee will be posted for comment and review. Not so much for comment. It will announce the Open Government Advisory Committee and ask for nominations to sit on that committee. And then it gives an email address to email those nominations in. We didn't do that through the regulations.gov because there's a bunch of like personal information involved in resumes, which gets hairy. But if you email those in, then we can start the process of collecting those. So do look at regulations.gov and not regulations.gov, the Federal Register, and you'll see it there tomorrow in its full form and right now for public inspection. And with that, I wanted to thank everyone. I want to thank the Data Foundation. I want to thank the Open Gov Hub and the Video Council for partnering with us on this event. We had a great turnout in the room and online, and thank you very much.
All right, well, I'll just say, Dan and to team at GSA, congratulations on getting the RFI published for the Federal Advisory Committee. I think it's a huge step for the work that you're doing. And for those of us that are promoting and encouraging openness in government. So in that spirit, I will also extend my thank you and appreciation to everyone who participated in the forum and provided comments. Many also sending comments in writing, which is another means of providing feedback. And continuing to find ways to do that and communicate effectively and engage with our government is so critical. Today we talked about data as one of the really important ways of having the information that both government needs, but also American society needs to be informed about what government is doing to hold it accountable, to make good decisions. And there are so many things that we need data for in our daily lives that we rely on government data for, often in open data. So let's work together and figure out how to do this better. And CDOs, the work at GSA, and the Open Government Secretariat all have a really critical role in continuing this great collaboration that's been going for many years. And I'll give Alex credit for echoing my comment earlier. We also need continued and sustained leadership from the White House, as well as others among the CDO Council and leaders throughout government to sustain this work for years to come. So, civil society, please continue to engage, don't stop. And to our government leaders, thank you for the service that you're doing. Please continue to keep that leadership moving forward. We're really thankful for the work that you're doing. On behalf of the Data Foundation, thanks to everybody for joining. I think that's a wrap for our discussion. So
that's it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
I used to have a job of maybe keeping people, wait a minute, hold on. And I just,